We now have Katherine Roos. Katherine loves working with entrepreneurs. She has personally counseled hundreds of small businesses as business advisor, consultant, and trainer. She has hands-on experience managing her own business, has several small business owners in senior position in public and private organizations she's held. As a small business manager with the City of Toronto Economic Development and Culture Division, Katherine oversees programs that serve more than 35,000 entrepreneurs, prospective entrepreneurs and small business owners every year. And most of you might be very familiar with the big fest that takes place around the Metro Toronto Centre every year. She provides input to economic development policy and facilitates linkage within city's diverse business community. A graduate of the University of Toronto, Katherine shops regularly at small businesses throughout Toronto. I may add here that while we were setting up this program a little bit in a hurry, Katherine was the first person who held my hand and took me for a small road show for engaging youngsters. Please help me welcome Katherine.
I have to tell you, you actually sort of stole my initial shtick here. I feel like I'm actually here as a result of networking, so I just thought I would tell you that story because I think it really illustrates what this session is all about. So I think 2 years ago, I was invited to a luncheon in Toronto where the City of Toronto was hosting business and economic development and municipal government officials from a sister city in China. Okay, couldn't imagine anything farther from where we are tonight, right here. And it was an extra ticket floating around for the division I work with in the City of Toronto. So I always like going and meeting new people. Anyway, so I sat down at a table beside Craig Brown, who is a senior partner with a large law firm in the city. So I thought, hey, this is an important person for me to know. And didn't you know, partway through the luncheon, my boss, the general manager of economic development in the City of Toronto, comes down and sits on my other side. So I'm thinking, boy, networking's good today. And Mike and Craig were talking about things they talk about. And Craig said to Mike, and Mike said to Craig, I think you should know Katherine. She's doing some interesting things. And Craig said, you know what, I know who Katherine needs to meet. She needs to meet the folks at the Indus Entrepreneurs. Todd. Subsequent to that, Chris set up a breakfast. Suresh and I met. Over the last year and a half, 2 years nearly, we've been networking quite actively, I believe. I have a great deal of respect, and I mean that very sincerely, for the work that Ty does. And I've been privileged to be involved in Ty Quest. And so when the information about the Ty Institute came alive, I thought this is my opportunity to give back. And I tried to help spread the word within my own network, and that's how I met the lead. And a couple weeks later, this opportunity to speak to you comes up. So I firmly believe I'm only here because of networking and because of follow-up and because of all the things that Bobby mentioned. And in fact, it sounds like you're here because of networking as well, because you met Suresh and Impact Event. So networking pays off all that. Anyway, it's very important in the job that I do. I'm going to be perhaps a little bit more of a mercenary than Bobby. I'm just as extroverted as you are. I'm not afraid to wade into a crowd of people and introduce myself blindly. But I have to tell you that 20 years ago, I hated networking. I thought it was awful. In fact, I often think that networking and dating are equally awful things. And I just equated networking with the same thing. So I want to be extremely practical. So for those, is there anybody in the room who admit they're not very comfortable networking, or they think it's kind of a... Okay, so at least there's a few that you're being honest. Thank you. Okay. Anyway, so I just want to be really straightforward. I want everybody to understand why we do this. Okay? Okay, so why do we network? Well, I chose these particular links, and they're obviously going to be available to you online. I chose these particular links because they're specific to business owners. So just, I think it was last month, OCTI, and it's the Ontario Cross-Border Technical Innovation Ecosystem project out of Ryerson University. They've been doing a study with entrepreneurs in Boston, New York, Toronto, Houston, you name it, the key technology centers in North America, trying to understand how networking works amongst entrepreneurs. And their key finding in the preliminary results, and they're continuing to explore this, is that startups with larger social networks are the ones that get money. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in running a business, at some time you're going to need money, right? Okay, so those of you who network effectively are more likely to get some money. So even if you're uncomfortable with it, if you think you want money, better suck it up and tell it, okay? A quote that I've used a number of times in speaking engagements is something that I read in Startup North, and they were apparently quoting a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, who knows where the original source was. Fortune favors the connected entrepreneur. And again, I think that really is the theme of today's event, and if you want to look up those references, you can check it out for yourself. But I think there's some very important reasons why we need to network, and that's to achieve our business outcomes. So why, practically speaking, do we network? We network because we need to find customers. All right? Sometimes customers, unless you're sort of a mass online marketer, selling tens of thousands of items a day, you're probably going to have to do some networking for customers. You're going to need suppliers. You're going to need market insight. How else are you going to keep track of what's going on in your marketplace? You're going to need champions. And I'll show you where I got that reference a little bit later. But a champion could be somebody who gets you inside of that huge target account you're going after. A champion can be a journalist that writes a really excellent piece about you in the media. Champion can be the person who pimps you at a networking event, okay, to borrow from Bob. Anyway, we all need champions. And at the end of the day, the myth of the entrepreneur as a lone wolf who works by themselves and does everything for themselves alone is just not true. It is a myth. Okay? We all need advisors, mentors, partner, money, you name it. And networking is the way to get out of your basement and start making those kinds of things happen for you. So, I also want to look at the flip side. There's a great podcast where Ian Portsmouth, who is the editor of Profit Magazine, is interviewing an academic from the University of Ottawa, and she's specifically speaking about women entrepreneurs. And I've worked for myself. I'm a big fan of women entrepreneurs. Over time, I'm going to see a few more ladies in the room here. But one of the reasons that women don't own as many businesses, according to the research that this academic has done, is because women don't often have the networks, or they may not be networking in the right circles, okay? And the same thing happens with newcomers who don't have local networks. The same thing happens with persons who've been out of the workforce, somebody with a disability. If you think of any population that is struggling to tackle entrepreneurship goals, often one of the things that holds them back is a lack of a network, okay? So we're gonna be more likely to achieve our goals if we network. Who's interested in that? Okay, we don't want to fail. Who's interested in that? Okay, networking is good and it's important. Why am I going? Okay, I'm going because I really want to meet the speaker. I'm going because I know those 4 other entrepreneurs and I want to get into their clique are going to be at this event. I'm going because I need to learn something. You know what, with that goal, it's okay to sit at the back of the room and listen. Okay? Or for me personally, I sometimes go to women's business networking events just because I want to let go, and just be myself and not have such serious goals for one event. Okay? So one of the things that I do to get over any discomfort that I might have with networking is to set a very specific goal. All right? Now, we also need to have big picture goals. So in my role as a small business manager for the City of Toronto, Toronto actually has the highest rate of self-employment in Canada. There are over 200,000 businesses. 77% of the employers have fewer than 10 employees. There's a lot of businesses to know. My counterparts in smaller communities actually can go mainstreaming and get to know personally the business owners out there. I do not have that luxury. So networking for me is a way to get out there and connect with real business owners, the people that I actually like networking with, okay? Not the bureaucrats and all those other kinds of things. But networking is an important way for me to get out there. And my goal when I'm networking in those kinds of circles is to say, you know what, the city actually cares. There's somebody at the city who's paying attention, okay? That is a big overall goal for me, okay? So I do set very specific goals. People come up to me all the time and say, oh, you're a big LinkedIn user. In fact, somebody called me a power user on LinkedIn. I have, I think, 11 or 1,200 contacts on LinkedIn. But you know what? That 200,000 small businesses to meet out there, I still have a long way to go. I set my own goals for my networking, okay, whether it's on a per event basis or overall. Okay? I also set goals around people that I want to meet, specific people, influencers and star entrepreneurs that we have in the city. Okay? And I'll specifically go to events because I want to hook up with those people. Because I want to demonstrate again that I really respect their efforts. But can you imagine if I brought David Ossa to an event like this so that you could hear from probably, I don't know, would you guys say that he's probably one of the entrepreneurs in the city that's received the most venture financing for very successful companies? In fact, I've heard that VCs in the city would write him, you know, a $2 million check without blinking. You know, if I could bring you to the table, and you know what? I'll connect you with him on LinkedIn, and I set that goal for myself. Okay? So goal setting is really important to deal with discomfort, to keep you focused, all right, and to ensure that you're networking in a context, not just being an extrovert and having fun with that, okay? Second, to know who you need to know and why. I guess I covered that. For me, knowing somebody like a David Ossa or a Suresh Madan or a Lalit or a Carl Moran or any of these kinds of people who are very influential in the entrepreneurship community in Toronto, I needed to figure out who they were first. Okay? When I started out in this role, yeah, sure, I'm a small business lead, I know a lot about small business, but I got to understand who I needed to know and why by scanning. Okay? So I actually put a lot of work into it. I scan regularly all kinds of blogs and websites, and I get e-newsletters, and I attend certain events, and I'm paying attention to who the influencers are, the key decision makers, and the thought leaders in the sphere of my job, okay? And so as a result of that activity, I know who I need to know and why. So to the excellent points that Bobby was making, when I come across them, in a random fashion, it doesn't have to feel random because I know that I wanted to meet them. And it feels like a lucky break, but you know what, there's a lot of homework in effort, okay? 6 degrees of separation. I really do believe that we're really well connected, and the internet just, I'll talk really briefly about, I think each of us will talk briefly about LinkedIn, but LinkedIn actually allows you to draw a map of that 6 degrees of separation, okay? I'm not sure if people are familiar with the Lean Startup movement and Eric Ries. Anybody heard of him? Awesome book, go get it. In fact, I tweeted to The Economist, they need to put that on their 2011 Book of the Year list. 2 years ago in my scanning, his name kept on coming up over and over and over again. We run big events in Enterprise Toronto, and I decided he was going to be caught, and I wanted to get in touch with him. So I went to LinkedIn, and I figured out who knew somebody who knew him, et cetera, and I actually had a conversation with him in California 2 years ago. Anyway, we didn't have him come out and speak at Small Business Forum, but boy, am I proud of myself that now that his book's out, and he's been to Mars, and he's been to U of T, and he's topping the business book lists in New York, et cetera, I talked to that guy because I decided he was important for me to know. Okay? So 6 degrees of separation. I really think that each one of us has the ability to figure out who that person is we need to meet and figure out what we have to get there. And it does take time. In fact, somebody, the question, Bobby, my back was to the room, but someone was asking a question, how far do you chase that person? Well, maybe you didn't get to Kasparov the first time, but that doesn't mean you lose sight of that goal and you don't try a second or a third or a fourth time. And that's what happened with Eric Ries, actually. I had to go through my network to a couple of people to actually talk with him. So being in the right place at the right time. Story here. Only half of my budget comes from the City of Toronto. I tell people that keeps me honest, that I always say our sweet spot at Enterprise Toronto is entrepreneurial organizations with fewer than 10 employees. So we're a team of 9, and I have to go and pound the pavement to generate sponsorships and grant money from other levels of government. So I say that really keeps me honest, it keeps me operating and thinking like a small business owner. So 2 years ago, or no, a year and a half ago, I did a lot of networking that year, I learned that LinkedIn was going to be coming to Toronto, and they were doing a lot of advanced media preparation to get people really excited about LinkedIn. And I thought, I love LinkedIn. totally understand the value of it. It's no longer just a human resources recruiting tool that I'm seeing small business owners all over Toronto using it for business development. I gotta meet these guys from LinkedIn because I can help them get started here. I think there's a really big win-win here. Anyway, I tried connecting with key people on LinkedIn. I followed up with their media people. I tried to figure out where the Toronto office was going to be and connect in with the guy who's going to head up the Toronto operation, et cetera, and I wasn't getting anywhere. And I understood why. They're busy, you know. I'm the one who wants to make the connection, so it's their prerogative not to respond. I have to make myself interesting enough to connect. So I learned that and I'm not going to remember his name anymore, but the former VP of International Business Development, or Global Business Development from LinkedIn, was going to be in Toronto to speak at the MESH conference down in Mars. And I networked to find myself a free ticket because my budget doesn't allow for things like that, and I introduced myself to that guy at that conference. Now, I still have not landed them as a sponsor yet, but I did set out to make some personal connections with those folks. And that, to me, is all about being in the right place at the right time, okay? And that could be your kid's soccer game because, another parent in the neighborhood works for the organization that you want to connect with. It could be being at a specific business conference. It could be just showing up at a startup drinks event in a bar, okay? But know where the right places are to be and make sure you're there, okay? Again, that's part of the goal setting, to know where the right places are. And scanning and understanding who the players are in your market space will also help you to identify where the right places are. Give before you get. I think Bobby delivered on that very well. That really is a role of any kind of interpersonal networking, in my opinion. I have entrepreneurs coming to me at Enterprise Toronto all the time, and they say, well, I hate selling things, or I'm lousy at networking, or I'm really shy, and we have some people raise their hands. At the end of the day, you know what? If you've got family relationships and friends, the skills that you use to maintain and manage those relationships are all the skills you need to be effective at networking. I really genuinely believe that, okay? And it's the same thing in the dating world, do you go straight to dinner and whatever else, or do you have a coffee first? Do you get to know each other a little bit? All these kinds of things are really important to do. Think about how you develop any personal relationship, and a give is always going to get you a positive response over being a gimme kind of person, okay? And then contact management. How many people use a contact management software like Act or Microsoft product, something like that? Okay, if you don't already, get one. Right now, I don't think you have to go and spend lots and lots of money on contact management. Of course, we live in a world that's driven by technology these days, but one could theoretically create an effective contact management system with a recipe box and cards, okay? A Rolodex system of some kind, whatever else. The bottom line is you need a contact management system of some kind, of any kind. You need to keep track of the relationships you have. You need to be able to calendarize follow-ups. You need to be able to make notes, okay? So that you can have intelligent conversations that build on each other. So I know a few things about Bobby now, and I probably will say, we've got an event coming up. I bet it would be really great. I'm probably going to make a note, and maybe I send something to one of my staff who's looking for great speakers and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, we'll talk. But you got to make notes like that. And in my contact records, in my silly group-wise in the City of Toronto, I'm going to make a note in the notes field that says, met Bobby at the Thai Institute, November 17, 2011. Because 2 or 3 years from now, when I have to come up here and deliver a story about a networking contact to break the ice, I can use that because I made a note of that. All right. Now, be careful when you're making notes. And I'm wearing my bureaucrat hat. Keep appropriate information about people because privacy does apply to all of us, and that includes our contact management databases. If it's pure business, you might be cautious about putting information about children and some of those kinds of things. But if it's an anniversary date for the business launch or any of those kinds of things, keep information about your contacts and your connections and your conversations. and it ensures that you can have more intelligent conversations down the road. I can tell you, with 1,000 conversations or connections on LinkedIn, I don't remember all the details about everyone. Okay, and if you're like me and your brain's like a sieve, keep notes. That's the perfect accommodation. Okay, keep notes so you remember the relationships that you're entering into. Okay, any questions, thoughts there? Pretty practical and mercenary, yeah. Yes.
I had a question about LinkedIn. I'm actually an MBA student, and
Yes.
I'm trying to connect to HR of various companies
Yeah.
through LinkedIn. I have not physically met them, and my success ratio is generally like I try to connect to 10 people and just one reply out of them. So, can you give some advice on how can I improve this ratio?
Well, if you're a direct marketer, you'd be really happy with that response rate. Okay, can I tell you, relationships take time. So, is it only 1 in 10 are accepting a LinkedIn connection?
Yes.
Okay.
Accepting and then replying further, like at present I'm in touch with bank's HR, and I'm really trying to connect to other people who are in that profile. So how can I enhance?
Okay, so I would back up for a second, and I think we could have a whole sidebar conversation. Maybe we can take some of this offline. But I think that comes back to who you need to know and why and what your goals are. Okay, so and it has nothing to do with networking. It has to do with understanding how large organizations make hiring decisions. So a large organization, I think you said a bank, an insurance company, that sort of thing. Yes, they have big, extensive insurance companies, and they're often participating in university-based career fairs and things like that, okay? But if you understand how a large firm works, HR is responsible for the hiring process, but at the end of the day, there is usually a hiring manager that will end up being your boss. So you may wish to cultivate relations with HR people, but it may be actually more important for you to cultivate relationships with the potential bosses, the actual individuals in the organization that you might actually work for. Okay? So if you're interested in a finance position, connecting with a manager of finance in a particular area and asking him a career-related question related to an assignment, and then seeing him at a professional event or her at a professional event, and then following up 6 months later after you've had a number of exchanges to ask for a career chat, might actually be a great way to get that person to champion you and refer you back into HR, who will put you in their hiring process. Okay? So 1 in 10 response rate is not necessarily bad, okay? But you want to learn a little bit more, and that's where it comes to scanning and doing your homework and understanding who you want to talk to and why you want to talk to them. Okay? That help?
Yeah.
Good. Yes?
You work a lot with small businesses and all that, and you've got 1,200 people on the LinkedIn, salaries, waste a lot of VC money, and all that. Have you ever wondered, what is it that makes people want to be influencers and put you in touch with someone else? Do you find, have you ever thought about what's in it for me? Like,
Oh, I do that all the time.
so what, do you ever play like, not devil's advocate, I don't know what the right word is, but it's like, let's say person A is putting you in touch with person B because, person
I'll
B
give you an
is the
example
person
from
you
this
get
week.
to.
I'll give you an example from this week. I try to be very thoughtful of the audiences and very respectful of the connection. So
Right.
I happen to know through a couple of casual professional contacts as well as some online connections, is he the president or the executive director of the Entrepreneurship Institute at Ryerson? Has anybody here a Ryerson student or graduate of Ryerson? Okay, I love the Entrepreneurship Institute. I think Steve Gideon is just brilliant. I think there's things going on at that school that aren't happening anywhere
What's
else.
his name, sorry?
Steve Gideon.
Okay.
Okay? Don't use that as my personal introduction. A lot of respect for him. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a serial angel investor. He's an academic. He's got credentials up the yin yang. Okay? And don't quote me on that. And I received a random telephone call from one of my colleagues at the city last week sometime from somebody who was, the guy was probably in his 50s, so had a very successful career, been CEO of numerous times, had been CEO of a private equity investment firm, et cetera, worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, considered himself an entrepreneur, et cetera. And he was looking for ways to give back. And somebody had said, you know what, talk to Katherine because, at least she'll know of ways that you can give back. Anyway, so I'm sure what my colleague was thinking, well, I'm just going to give it to Katherine. So we had a very interesting conversation because I can use all the help I can get with my little team that is only half funded by the city. And so I talked about the opportunities I had, and it was really straightforward, as Bobby is, about what I can and cannot do, and I don't have any money to pay. And he said, well, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I had this in mind. And I said, I should introduce him to Steve Gettian. But I was respectful about it. I said, you know what? I know this fantastic program at Ryerson that I think you might find really interesting and motivating to participate in. I think you'd have an enormous amount to contribute. Oh, my son goes to Ryerson. You're right, I love that school. Okay? So, a couple days later, I very carefully crafted an email to Steve Gettian where I said, Steve, I'm an enormous fan of what you're doing. You're doing some things that nobody else is doing, and it's really quite admirable. I happen to have just recently connected with a very senior executive who's interested in finding ways to give back. May I connect the two of you? Okay? So, very respectful that Steve doesn't want to be inundated with 100,000, every entrepreneur in the city that wants to start a business. I gave him a very specific one. I was also cognizant that the person that I was referring was a very senior person who operates on the same level as he does, and I made that connection.
So everybody plays gatekeeper to some extent.
Everybody plays gatekeeper. And there's two sides to that, okay? I hope, as a result of my thoughtful consideration of who I would refer to Steve, that my reputation in his mind grows.
So that's the best.
And so that's what I get out of it.
So that's what you get out of it.
Yeah, and Steve, hopefully he thinks, I'm going to think of somebody that might be useful for Katherine. There's always you give before you get, you give before you get. Okay? And be always very thoughtful of the relationship. Yeah. In fact, I annoyed my sister this week. She's just moved to Ethiopia. She works for the Canadian International Development Agency. And I had somebody come in who's interested in doing microcredit and exporting a Canadian franchise concept to Africa. And I made some reference in an earlier conversation about my sister working for CETA. Well, I made a blind introduction. My sister writes me back. Of course, I'm not going to, now she's not right here. You can't fight it out in hub, right? And so she writes, can you not just do that and make a cold referral like that? So I say, look, I think forgiveness, and I think you really like this woman. And it all worked out in the end. But if I did that to somebody who wasn't my sister, that might be the end of that relationship. Yeah. Okay? Anyway, I didn't want to talk here. I just do that. Okay, so same thing as Bobby said. Networking is useless if you don't follow up. Okay? How many people are really good at follow-up? Okay, I think some of you are lying. I stink at it. It's something that I worked really hard in my career to do. And let me tell you, it's one of the most important things I've learned how to do. Okay? So if you're not so great at follow-up, create a system for yourself. Calendarize things. Create flags in your database of whatever it is that you do, but follow-up is going to be key. I know just watching my own staff that I have staff with varying levels of sales skill. And at the end of the day, it's the person who just does the plain old follow-up that is ahead. Okay? So follow-up, 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 follow-up. You get nothing out of tonight. The secret to networking is follow-up. Okay, so where to find the cool kids? I was moderating a panel at a Small Business Arts Forum earlier in the year, and one of the women on the panel, a filmmaker, was talking about how she has got financing for programs and connections that she has with film producers and anyway folks in Europe and in the U.S. And someone in the audience said, "Well, how did you meet those people?" And she laughed because she said, first of all, I graduated with a fine arts degree. I didn't go to one of the hot film schools or whatever else. She said, so I had to work harder than other people to make these connections. She said, but I was talking to my teenage nephew recently, and she said, I said something to him about how are you making the transition to high school? He says, you just watch who the cool kids are, and then you start following them around, and eventually they talk to you. Okay? You watch and you figure out who the cool kids are, you start following them around, and eventually they'll talk to you. And that was one of the most brilliant pieces of advice I've ever heard. Okay? So, where to find the cool kids? This is a research exercise, okay? So again, for those of you who are shy or you're, analytically oriented rather than people oriented, this should be your forte. Industry associations and industry media, really great places to scan and find out who's who and what's going on. General business associations and media, conferences, meetups. Once I was dealing with a student entrepreneur who was afraid of marketing, and he was saying, oh, there's no place I can go to find my prospective customers. And I Googled meetup and the type of business he was in. We got 50,000 hits. Okay? Anyway, I was being a little tough on this kid now because he was really bright and just wasn't getting going. Anyway, there's tons of those kinds of things out there. So research them, figure it out, and you'll get there. Referrals. Ask smart people where they met other smart people. Figure that out. Ask the entrepreneurs that you admire how they got to know who they got to know. Okay? If I was a chess winning, I'd be all over that story about Casper. Okay? Social media conversations. Just being on social media, I don't think is enough. I think you do have to participate in a dialogue. I'm learning that every day myself. I've got a LinkedIn group. I'm experimenting with it all the time. But it's not just having a connection or having a business card in your Rolodex. It's about engaging. In fact, I understand that the term engagement marketing is becoming hot lately. So it's about engaging, getting involved in a conversation. If do you really think of somebody you've never had a conversation with as a contact? They're certainly not going to be top of mind when an opportunity comes across. Okay? And directories. Anybody can come to Enterprise Toronto and get a directory of all the aerospace companies in Toronto or all of the VC firms or whatever. There's places to get that kind of information. Okay? So you can be very methodical and thorough about figuring out where people are. Now, another comment, do it your way. And here I'm going to tell you a story about my husband. So I'm the extroverted, chatty Kathy, not afraid to talk to anybody. In fact, when we're traveling, he'll put me in front and say, you go ask that question, or you talk to them, or get the ketchup off somebody else's table, okay? He's an economist. He likes working with Excel models and being behind them. Except, you know what? I actually think he's probably a better networker than I am. You know why? Because he's very sincere. He has very rich one-on-one conversations. The guy can talk about sports, about kids, about music, about an art auction. He can talk about all of those different things and really connect with an individual. He's very methodical about following up. I see when he comes home from his events, he empties out his pockets of all the business cards and stacks them by the eggs in the door so he brings them to work the next day, et cetera, okay? So you don't have to be extroverted like Bobby and I to be good at networking. You've got to be yourself. That's far more important. So if your style is to have one-on-one conversations, your style is to have a telephone conversation and meet somebody casually and have a bit of a lead up to a meeting, great. It's the outcome that counts, not how you get there, okay? Share, help, ask lots of questions. These are all things that are very well. This is an old book actually, and I pulled it off my personal business bookshelf. Ellie Rubin wrote this book, Bulldog. It's actually from 1999, so pre-LinkedIn. And I have to tell you, I'm not big on reading, motivational how-to sales or networking books. But page 149 to 157 in Ellie Rubin's book has the best description of being a mercenary when it comes to networking. She, in fact, tells you how to build an Excel sheet with all the people that you know in it and all the different degrees of people to get there, okay? Thank God for LinkedIn, it does have that work for you. But if you're really, struggling or you want to check it out, your local library probably has this book. Apparently it was a bestseller in Canada. She's still on the speaker circuit. It's a great book on entrepreneurship, period. But those 8 pages I've never forgotten. And in fact, using the term 6 degrees of separation, she proved to me back then when I first read that book that it really is, there's a path to anybody who wants to be out there, okay? She also talks about champions and identifying who gatekeepers are, just very strategic about it. Okay, LinkedIn. So I first got into using social media because as a small business manager and working in business incubators and things like that, I thought I can't be, can't professionally have any credibility in a city like Toronto, which is the 3rd or 4th tech hub in North America, without having any understanding of social media. So I tried it. the bottom line is there are 70 million users, there's more than 2 million in Toronto. Average age of a LinkedIn user is over the age of 41. So they're affluent, they're decision makers, they're influencers, okay? That's why I go to LinkedIn. I use Facebook just for personal reasons. I don't let anybody from my business world get into my Facebook account. And I use Twitter to connect with young entrepreneurs. And it's proven to be really useful to me. That's the end of my presentation. So there are my contact details if you want to connect with me. I am keen to connect with anybody who's in a business in this city or wants to be in a business. I think, is it Julie? Is it Julie? Sorry, I'm not remembering your name. I feel really bad. You and I met 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
and you,
Amelia.
I'm sorry, and you followed up with me very well. So if you don't have questions for me, maybe you should ask Amelia because she's good at networking. Thank you very much.